This is lecture number DR028WS02. This is the 28th of the Mega Genius lectures and the second lecture of the Whole Truth series. It was recorded on November 22nd, 2000. The title of this lecture is Nitroglycerin and Mexican Jumping Beans. It is 31 minutes long. Copyright 2000 by Mega Genius. All rights reserved. This lecture is protected by internationally valid copyright. It may not, in whole or in part, be duplicated, transmitted, or otherwise reproduced without the express permission of Mega Genius. Unauthorized translation, importation, or distribution is a violation of applicable laws. Mega Genius is a United States federally registered trademark and service mark. And now, here is Mega Genius.
In the last lecture, we learned, among other things, that truth is the total absence of falseness, and that the direction to proceed to discover ultimate truth is toward falseness. Now you are close to entering a realm only dreamed of through the ages. You are standing at the threshold of the road to truth. Congratulations. Look down. The welcome mat has hardly been used. I cannot tell you that you are about to go where no one has gone before, but I can tell you that any footprints you see are recent indeed. Now, once you know exactly what you want to obtain and in what direction to proceed, you need to know how to recognize it when you see it. I'm referring to the ability to differentiate, intelligence. How do you know if something is true or false when you see it? That question is the conundrum of humanity, and the answer is the third golden rule. The difference between a valuable datum that is a clue and one that is a golden key is that the clue is extremely helpful to know, but the door to truth remains locked without all three golden keys. Consequently, without one more golden key, the third lock will remain solidly latched. So, let's delve ahead. Truth appears to have many revolving facets. One moment it's like a bucket of fresh water, and the next moment it's like a butterfly. At other times it's like nothing you would ever imagine. Here's an example. In the region of the Mojave Desert in eastern California and southern Nevada, there is a formation appropriately named Death Valley, the driest area north of the equator and one of the lowest and hottest places on Earth. If you descend to the valley floor and attempt to cross it, past Stovepipe Wells and Furnace Creek, you will discover two things. First, at a depth of about 282 feet below sea level, where the ground temperature can approach the boiling point of water, you will stumble onto a small place called Bad Water. Second, you will discover later that because you went there, almost everyone who knows you will question your sanity. I know, I've been to Badwater many times. Badwater is a small pool at a slow simmer, teeming with the wriggling larvae of what an entomologist would refer to in scientific terms as God only knows what. The first time I walked up to Badwater, I took one look at the water and, with the aid of the genius formula and immeasurable intelligence, proclaimed, "That's bad water." Truth is like bad water. Even if one has the IQ of a brick, one glance and he knows instantly what it is. Here is another mega-truth. One always recognizes truth when he sees it. He may have great trouble distinguishing right from wrong, and he may often differentiate poorly between truth and falseness, but if it's true and he sees it, believe me, he knows it's true. He only gets into a confusion because some things that are false can look like truth too. I'll tell you more about that later. Now, let's slow down here and look at where we are stepping. If one never fails to recognize truth when he sees it, then why have people frequently failed to see the truth when you pointed it out to them? What's the matter with children or parents or spouses or friends? You just wanted to help. You know you saw the truth. why couldn't they see it when you tried to show it to them? The almost ridiculously simple answer is because they could not see it. Every person is unique. He has different interests, likes and dislikes, preferences in music, tastes in food, in clothing, in art, in life. From his viewpoint, he has had many experiences unlike yours. That's the key to why. His considerations and experiences are unique. Therefore, he responds differently than you. He sees things from a different perspective than you. He is not you. It is as though he is looking through a different lens. Let's call it his truth distortion lens. It is not that he does not want to see your truth. Believe me, he wants to see truth. And he does see truth, his own truth. It's just that the truth you see and the truth he sees are two different pieces of truth. You don't understand why he does not see your piece of truth, because it's so obvious to you. But here's a secret. You are not seeing his piece of truth either. You think you are, but you are not. You are seeing only part of his piece of truth, at best. For if you were seeing his whole piece of truth, you would instantly understand why he was not seeing all of yours. In order for the two of you to be seeing identical pieces of truth all the time, the two of you would have to have all the same considerations about everything and all the same experiences. Technically, the two of you could never be the same person, but you would have to be at least mirror images, right down to the very last thought. Now, do you see why everyone else doesn't see everything exactly the same as you? Let's step aside for a couple of minutes and look at where we are. Are you seeing all the piece of truth I'm showing you? Are you really seeing? Truth, I know, can appear extremely esoteric, but honestly, it is the most applicable commodity in this universe. For example, right here and now we are dancing the Highland Fling all around the basic reason anyone has ever had an argument with anyone else. Can you remember a time you got into an argument with someone? Go ahead, recall a specific time. I'll bet the argument was really because he was not seeing all the truth that you were seeing. Then, of course, if you turn over the next rock on the road to truth, you discover that you are not seeing his piece of truth either. Not completely. Would you like a very intelligent solution to any argument? Would you use it if I gave it to you, no matter how unusual it might seem? A truly intelligent solution would have to appear quite out of the ordinary, you know. Otherwise, every person of ordinary mentality would have recognized and implemented it ages ago, and nothing more than minor disputes would exist today. Do you promise you will use it? All right. The next time you find yourself in an argument with someone, you will be too upset to easily see all the piece of truth the other person is viewing. After all, you were not seeing it even before you began to become upset. Therefore, don't even try. Just say to yourself, the devil with it. You only have to do one thing. Listen. That's all. It does not matter what unreasonable statements the other person makes. Just listen. It does not matter how irrational his thinking is. Just listen. It does not matter what loaded words he uses, or how animated his actions, or what screwball things from the past the crackpot brings up. Just listen. What will happen? The other person will be upset too, demonstrating it by words and actions. If you just listen, however, and only listen, and not speak unless you are asked a question, and only then if the other person really wants an answer, which he will usually indicate by asking the same question again, but you don't answer until the third time, two things will occur. First, the other party will cease to become more upset. You may or may not notice this. If he appears to become more upset, it's only because he has not yet had the opportunity to fully express the height of his frustration. Second, the person will subsequently become less upset. This may happen quickly, or it might take a little while, but it will happen. You just listen and trust me. The other person will calm down. Only the truly insane find it worthwhile to argue endlessly with themselves. Next, something interesting indeed will occur, although you may never have seen it happen in all of your life, because you probably never got to that point before. As you listen and allow the person to verbalize and act out his frustration, he will become less frustrated, and less frustrated, and less, and less. And finally, if all you have done is listen, shazam, just like a magic trick, the person will not be upset anymore. The two of you may not be in complete agreement, but the other party will no longer be upset. It will happen. Any person who has ceased to be upset will see more clearly than when he was upset. Once the other party is no longer upset, he will begin to examine your piece of truth. Why? Because all man has ever wanted to know is the truth, and now that the argument is over, the other party resumes his search at a point in time that he is seeing more clearly. He may begin by asking you questions about what you think is true. He may tell you what part of your truth he sees as true. Believe me, though, he is looking. Will he see all the piece of truth that you see? Maybe yes, and maybe no, at that moment. But you just won an argument by allowing the other person to talk himself out of his frustration so that he could resume his day-to-day search for truth. He isn't arguing anymore. Furthermore, as he continues to look, with a little patience on your part, he just may look his way right into seeing all of your piece of truth, which you allowed him to do simply by listening, and end up agreeing that you are right. It will often happen. Now that's thinking like a genius. Why does it work? It works because of what the two of you are really doing. You have your line of thinking as you search for more truth. Call it your road to truth. And the other party has his line of thinking as he searches for more truth. Call it his road to truth. And a difference of viewpoint began to escalate into an argument at the exact point that you each felt that the other was trying to force you off your own road to truth. Only people who intend to commit evil acts would really try to do that, and they constitute a minuscule percentage, about 2% of the population. The point is that you each thought that trying to force you off the road to truth was the other's intention, and thereby misunderstood the other's intention, both of you. It not only takes two to tango, it also takes two to tangle, at least in an argument. It also takes two misunderstoods. Truth and force are like nitroglycerin and Mexican jumping beans. They do not mix. Nevertheless, if you insist on mixing them, as most people do, watch out for the pyrotechnics. That's all an argument really is, you know. Each person thinks that the other is trying to force him away from what he knows darn well is true, and so the sparks fly, and then the fireworks begin. What is actually happening is that, regardless of your intention, if you are in an argument, you are putting out force. If you don't believe me, just stand back and look at yourself. Now here's the kick. If the truth be known, it's your force that is being kicked back at you. Yes, it is. You put it out and it bounces back. You want proof? Just cease putting it out, as in listen, and watch how quickly the force that has been coming at you withers. Isn't truth grand? Now, does this technique of listening really work? It surely does. I live in the same world, more or less, that you do, and whenever I find two people arguing, I try to take aside the one screaming most softly and give him a crash course in my how to win any argument by doing nothing technique. It's easier to apply, however, if you either find yourself in an argument or set about to teach someone who's not already upset. Attempting to introduce the technique for the first time to a couple who are in the midst of an argument is somewhat trickier, and I have the scratches to prove that too. The technique of just listening has only a couple of exceptions that come to mind, one minor and one major. The minor exception is that since you are only listening, you might occasionally nod your head, never shake it, briefly, just to let the other person know that you are really doing what I said to do, listening. There is no need to nod just to let him know you are still alive, as the technique will even work well whether you are or not. The major exception to just listening is that if anything that even remotely reminds you of an airborne iron skillet approaches your vicinity, duck. Then just listen. The most difficult thing to find is anyone who thinks he ever lost an argument. Each opponent invariably thinks that he won. The technique that I have just outlined, however, results in a completely different effect. In essence, your opponent hears the bell and comes out swinging. His opponent, though, suddenly disappears. So he burns off emotion, quiets down, gets a grip again on his piece of truth, and then begins to look for yours. Often he will find it, and decide you were right, too. Now that is really winning an argument. Listening, by the way, is an extremely underappreciated commodity. For example, do any persons come to mind as I ask these questions? Do you know someone who is hostile about a particular matter, who is not only quick to anger if someone disagrees with him, but is not at all receptive to hearing or reading about opinions that are at variance with his own, who seems unwilling to calmly discuss evidence that does not support his belief, who frequently backs up his belief with things he has read or heard from an eminent source, who is prone to attacking or attempting to stop other people? Or do you know someone who is unreasonably afraid of something, who spends an inordinate amount of time fearing that something might occur, who talks about it frequently but never seems to effectively address the problem, who acts nervous when discussing it and dreads its occurrence, who worries continually about it happening? Or do you know someone who is consumed by grief, who is easily reminded of the loss and cries about it frequently, who really does not want to talk about the pain in any depth, although it is continually on his mind, who knows it is something that he will never get over, who actively avoids allowing himself to be put in a situation in which he could be hurt like that again? Did someone come to mind? The point is this: let the angry person rant until he calms down. Have the fearful person tell you what he would have to do to feel safe. Offer the one who is grief-stricken a handkerchief and sit quietly while he cries. Do not make the mistake, however, of assuming that you are attempting to deal with anything other than a severe lack of intelligence in that particular area, unless you have time and energy to waste. That is the condition. That is why a person of even above average intelligence is very unlikely to change the angry person's opinion, abolish the fearful person's worry, or eliminate the sorrowful person's grief. He assumes that what he is addressing is a sufficiency of intelligence, but he is not on that specific subject. You may successfully relate with intelligence by talking, but you should invariably deal with significant lack of intelligence indicated by the emotion being vented by just listening. Discipline yourself to try it sometime. The results may startle you. Now we will look at the relationship between truth and the survival of your planet. Here is something worth a tome, but it can be distilled into a few paragraphs. Do you wish for world peace? Do you have a clue about what needs to be done to have it? Well, now you do. What is the difference between an argument between two individuals and an all-out war between nations or worlds? There is no significant difference except magnitude. Occasionally, one person with bad intent will attack another, or the leader of one nation will suddenly clobber its neighbor due to its own severe deficiency of ethics. But usually it's merely a case of a simple argument that began with a misunderstanding and escalated until it has gone to hell in a handbasket. Too often people place too much emphasis on words spoken and too little importance on the underlying intentions. Here is another megatruth. Words are merely symbols that represent intentions. Intentions are far more important than the words used. For example, such was the case on the 27th of October, 1962, when the United States and the Soviet Union were, as has often been said, eyeball to eyeball. They did not carry the handbasket all the way to hell, but they dropped it less than a step away. World leaders and their advisors on both sides had substantial doubts that they or anyone else would even have a tomorrow. Unknown to the public, they were that close to blowing the crust off the planet and plunging it and every life form on it into a nightmare of darkness, freezing temperatures, and poisonous radiation. Moreover, if the truth be known, they were closer than that. Minutes. We all were actually only minutes, at most, from being eyeball with the Stone Age. The reason it was barely averted was not at all because of great minds. Great minds would never have allowed the planet and its billions of inhabitants to have been placed in such a deadly position. It was essentially averted because neither President John F. Kennedy and his closest advisor, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, nor Soviet Premier Nikita S. Khrushchev wanted a thermonuclear holocaust, and because each finally began to believe that the other was really telling the truth to the best of his ability to see it. Therefore, as they each questioned the other's intentions less, they each also began to look a little more closely at the other's piece of truth. Consequently, they saw a little more of the other's piece of truth, agreed with it more, and agreed themselves into a way to avert Armageddon. The easy way to have averted it would have started with the two leaders negotiating eyeball to eyeball across the proverbial table. By that I mean I would have begun by setting them down and removing the heavy, massive, official-looking table from between them that diplomatic etiquette supposedly requires. Government officials lack much of the truth about the art of negotiating, which is why they talk so much and accomplish so little. We spent decades arguing about the balance of nuclear power, which was rather like two men locked in a room stocked to the hilt with glass jugs of gasoline, fighting over the issue that one had 20,000 matches and the other had only 19,998. In 1962, the world's future was determined through a pair of scales. One side of the scales was loaded with all the intercontinental ballistic missiles that money could buy, and the scale's other side was filled with all the truth that the very best minds in the most powerful governments on earth were able to recognize in the 20th century. Even though truth is the greatest defense there is, all the truth that they could muster was only enough to just barely even out the precariously hung scales, as the future of the world and the lives of everyone in it also hung in the balance. Then, because one of the men took one final glance at the other's piece of truth and recognized an iota of truth that he had never seen before, the scales tipped ever so slightly, and an entire planet of worthy people survived to see another sunrise. That is not overstating it. On the 27th of October, 1962, that is the truth of what occurred in the White House and the Kremlin. All because a man saw an itty-bitty piece of truth that he had never seen before. No, it was not avoided by intelligent thought as much as by each being forced, by time running out and the approaching footsteps of the inevitable, to look at more of the other person's piece of truth. they did not do it the easy way, but in this particular case, at 23:59 o'clock and counting, at least they did do it. Other men in other times might do better, but would often do worse. Do you think that truth might be a subject worth studying? Do you think we might have the beginning of a better world if we teach children reading and writing and even a few of the workable basics about truth? What do you think? When we found our planet armed to the brink of insanity with nuclear bombs, don't you think it was high time that we initiated a little research into the greatest defense of all, truth? That was a critically important subject that no think tank, university, or government has ever effectively studied. Bisexual frogs in Poland? Oh, the United States government studied those many years ago at considerable cost. The perspiration of Aborigines in Australia? Oh, it spent taxpayers' money on that one too. Truth? It has not a dime or a dickens to show for it. Nothing. It hasn't even a clue to this day what truth really is. Do you see an incorrect assignment of importance there? Now, understand, I have no interest in criticizing the government of the United States, or any other government for that matter. I proudly own and lease to museums the most popular patriotic painting in the world, Archibald M. Willard's The Spirit of '76. It's just that, as a public-spirited United States citizen, I seek to support my country whenever it's right, and, in a civilized manner, help steer it back on a more ethical course when it is not. No one should do less for his country. If this world can elect, appoint, or in any other manner install just a few world leaders of sufficient intelligence soon, a particularly unusual and honorable thing will occur, resulting in an effect many light years away. Instead of us being just one more planetary civilization that entered the nuclear age and then blew itself apart, the beings who keep the records for the star system of which our sun is a part, and they are out there, will be forced instead to recognize us as that particularly unique one that did not. Anyhow, from simple arguments to wars to world peace, you can see that truth can be a most applicable commodity. It all depends on how much of it you can see, and to what extent you use it. So, where do we now stand in our search for the third golden key? Well, it is the most difficult to obtain because the third lock is the trickiest to open, but we are progressing. If you think that the old philosopher got kicked around and dumped into the drink on each of the first two locks, just wait until we have finished picking this one. It would have knocked him comatose and pitched him over Victoria Falls. In the interim, just keep your bow pointed toward my stern. I know these waters well. The primary point we are addressing is that one always recognizes truth when he sees it, when he is viewing it directly. That's a vital clue to obtaining the third golden key, and it's a point that you need to see so that you recognize it as truth. Because it's such an important piece of truth, let's address it further. Imagine that you are standing between Jane, to your left, and John, to your right, holding a ball in your hand. As you display it at their eye level, you ask, "What color is this ball?" Jane replies, "Blue." John replies, "Green." Well, what is the truth? Is it blue? Is it green? Is it bluish green? Is someone lying? Is someone colorblind? Did someone misunderstand the question? What is the truth? What do we know? Well, one thing we know is that as long as both parties understood the question, and no one is lying, it looks blue to Jane and green to John. Something else we know is that to try to get either party to see it as a different color by using pressure, ridicule, anger, etc., any force, is a mistake. Why? Here is a mega-truth. The basic reason for any argument is the consideration that one is being forced away from his recognition of truth. Now you look at the ball. What color is it? Aha! It's half blue and half green, you say, and you are seeing the truth. The side toward Jane is painted blue, and the side facing John is painted green. It wasn't blue. It wasn't green. It wasn't bluish green. No one was lying. No one was colorblind. Everyone understood the question. No one saw the truth except you. Now that sort of thing happens continually in court systems around the world, as any judge can tell you. Two individuals witness an event, and the judge hears diabolically conflicting testimony. Given that no one is committing perjury, you could swear that the witnesses must not have even been in the same hemisphere at the time. What are we looking at here? We are looking at the truth distortion lens factor again. Just because the witnesses saw or recall an event differently does not necessarily mean that one or the other is lying or has been lobotomized. Every being in this universe who has not unlocked the door to truth and traveled beyond, all the way along the road to truth, to its end, is looking at everything around him through a truth distortion lens. It's as though he has a large, irregularly ground lens in front of his face that distorts, in varying degrees, almost everything at which he is looking. Some things he can see clearly through the lens, as they are sharply in focus. In those instances he is seeing truth. Everything else that he looks at is distorted in varying degrees. Long before you see the entire picture of truth, you will realize that the few things that are in focus for the average person are few indeed. In the next lecture, we will investigate the truth distortion lens.